Welcome in to today's edition of the Back Porch Sports Reports Player Profile. A look at influential sports figures' careers straight off the express lane. There will be a mixture of well-known players and some you've never heard of. Hopefully it will be fun and informative. Today's player is Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young. John Stephen Young was born on October 11th, 1961 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He is the great-nephew of Brigham Young, the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His father, LaGrange Grit Young, I love that name, played football at BYU in the late 50s. He led the school in scoring in 1955 and in rushing and total offense in 1959. His son, Steve Young, attended Greenwich High School in Greenwich, Connecticut, where he played quarterback on the Cardinals football team. He earned 1978 All-FCIAC Western Division First Team honors in his junior year. That was his first year as a starter. In his senior year, he rushed for 13 touchdowns and earned all FCIAC West Division First Team honors once again, and was named to the CIAC All-State Team. In the rush first option offense ran by Greenwich, he completed only 41% of his throws, which wasn't that great. He completed it for 1,220 yards, but he did run the ball 267 times for almost 2,000 yards, 1,928 to be exact. In that year, on Thanksgiving Day, November 1979, Greenwich actually lost to Darren High School, which it was known for at the time, its tidal wave defense, 17-0. That was the only loss that year. During his senior year, he was co-captain of the football, basketball, and baseball teams. In basketball, he actually averaged 15 points a game, and in baseball, he hit .384 and played center field when he wasn't pitching. He was 5-1 and actually threw a 3-0 no-hitter against New Canaan High School in that same year. So this was probably one of the first all-around athletes to play quarterback in football. Now, as far as his college football years went, Young was heavily recruited by the University of North Carolina. At the time, their coach was Dick Crum. He was enamored with Young's running ability and wanted him to run his option offense. Young instead chose BYU due to the family connections, and initially it looked like he'd made a mistake. He struggled at throwing the ball, and BYU's coaching staff considered switching him to defensive back based on his athleticism. However, during the offseason and in the first couple of years he was at school, he worked hard to improve his passing skills and eventually succeeded record-setting Jim McMahon as BYU's starting quarterback. Young's senior year, which was 1983, was spectacular. He actually passed for 3,902 yards and threw 33 touchdowns in the regular season. And probably better than that, his 71.3% completion percentage set an NCAA single-season record. He also added 544 yards rushing. With Young at quarterback, BYU set an NCAA record by averaging 584 yards of total offense, with 370 of those yards coming from Young's passes and his rushes. The Cougars finished the year with an impressive 11-1 record. Young was named first-team All-American by several news organizations and received the Davy O'Brien National Quarterback Award, which recognizes the nation's best collegiate quarterback each year. He also finished second in voting for the Heisman Trophy behind Nebraska running back Mike Rozier. Young capped off his college career by scoring the game-winning touchdown on a pass actually from his halfback in BYU's 21-17 victory over Missouri in the 1983 Holiday Bowl. Young finished his collegiate career with 592 pass completions for 7,733 yards and 56 touchdowns, along with 1,048 yards rushing and 18 touchdowns on the ground. He was enshrined in the College Football Hall of Fame in 2001. Now, coming out of college, Steve didn't actually take a direct path to the NFL. He was selected by the Los Angeles Express in the first round with actually the 11th overall pick of the 1984 USFL draft. He actually signed a record 10-year, $40 million contract with the Express in March of 1984. He agreed to take his payments in the form of an annuity paid over 40 years to help the fledgling team. It was by far the richest contract they had ever had. Now, also, it was taken for granted that Young would have been selected with the first pick of the 1984 NFL draft and that he would have been selected by the then terrible Cincinnati Bengals. Express general manager Don Klotzerman told Young that if he signed with the Express and not with the Bengals, his head coach would be John Adel, a former All-Pro quarterback who had shepherded John Elway through his first year in the NFL. Klosterman also told Young that Hall of Fame coach Sid Gilman, who had been hired as a consultant, would tutor him on how to be a pro quarterback. This was enough to convince Young, and he signed with the Express. At the time, it was another huge signing for the fledgling league, which had already succeeded in signing both the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, running back Mike Rozier from Nebraska, and the previous winner, Georgia running back Herschel Walker. After missing the first 6 games of his rookie season while taking some college classes in order to graduate on time, Young started the final 12. He had a respectable year, highlighted by becoming the first pro quarterback to ever pass for 300 yards and rush for 100 in a single game. Despite being surrounded by talent, which included future NFL players JoJo Townsell, Mel Gray, and Kevin Nelson, and making the playoffs in Young's first season, the Express were never able to create a sustaining fan base in Los Angeles, and that's actually something that even the Los Angeles Rams of today still struggle with. To add to that, late in the season, the New York Times published an investigation of owner J. William Oldenburg's finances, which suggested that Oldenburg was not as well off as he claimed. The FBI had been investigating Oldenburg since the middle of the season. A week after the Times article, Oldenburg stopped paying all of the Express bills, forcing the league to draw on the team's emergency line of credit to keep it going through the playoffs. Another team in the league, the Houston Gamblers' minority partner Jay Allier, stepped in to buy the team, only to be pushed out when it emerged that when he too had misrepresented his net worth. The league took control of the team and cut expenditures to the bare minimum. After that, the other teams made contributions to keep the Express going through the season, enough to meet payroll, but not much else. Under the circumstances, the 1985 season rapidly became a fiasco. Before one game, the team bus driver refused to drive the Express to their final home game, which had been moved to Los Angeles Pierce College in the San Fernando Valley unless he was paid up front in cash. Young contributed some money, as did the team trainer, and the driver took them to the game. In the season finale at Orlando, Young had to line up at tailback because of a rash of injuries had left the Express without any healthy running backs. The owners had refused to allocate any money to allow the Express to replace the injured players. It was reported that Young had insured the contract and would still be paid until 2027. However, a 1985 LA Times article stated that he received a $1.4 million settlement on the annuity. The league ceased operations in 1986 after losing most of its claims in an antitrust suit against the NFL, with its top talent absorbed by the NFL in a draft conducted in the aftermath. Now, Steve Young had grown increasingly dissatisfied with the disarray surrounding the Express just 1 week before what proved to be the last USFL title game. Young gave the USFL an ultimatum: find a new owner for the Express or allow him to buy out his contract and go to the NFL. Soon after the league decided to suspend the Express operations for the 1986 season, Young bought out his Express contract and signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had made him the first pick in a supplemental draft. By this time, though, the Bucs were in the midst of what would be 12 consecutive 10-loss seasons. They posted identical 2-14 records in Young's 2 seasons with them, going 3-16 with him as the starter. Young threw for only 11 touchdowns with 21 interceptions, while completing fewer than 55% of his passes. Now, going forward, the Bucs had selected University of Miami quarterback Vinny Testaverde first overall in the 1987 NFL Draft because Young was deemed a bust. Young was then traded to the San Francisco 49ers on April 24, 1987, to serve as a backup to Joe Montana. 49er coach Bill Walsh was impressed by Young's natural abilities and believed his lackluster numbers were primarily due to the lack of talent around him in Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers received second and fourth round picks in the trade, which they used to draft Miami linebacker Wilson Moss and Arizona State wide receiver Bruce Hill, respectively. Steve Young played behind Joe Montana for 4 years, but shone as a backup, substituting for an injured Montana early in the first quarter of a 1987 game against the Chicago Bears. He threw 4 touchdown passes in a 41-0 victory. In their 1987 divisional playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings, he replaced Montana in the second half after the team fell behind 27-10. The 49ers still lost the game, but Young had a good performance, completing 12 of 17 passes for 158 yards and a touchdown with 1 interception, while also leading San Francisco in rushing with 72 yards and a touchdown on 6 carries. On October 30th, 1988, Young ran for a 49-yard game-winning touchdown against the Vikings. He started the game out with a 73-yard touchdown pass to John Taylor after Montana went down with an injury. The play earned the 49ers a 24-21 victory and a bit of revenge on the Vikings for their previous season's playoff loss. The win turned out to be critical, as without it, the 49ers would have finished 9-7 and missed the playoffs, as 2 other teams in their division, the Los Angeles Rams and the New Orleans Saints, had 10-6 seasons. Instead, the 49ers won their division, earning the second playoff seed, and went on to win the Super Bowl. In 1989, Steve Young displayed potential to become the team's starter in the future, while Montana won the NFL MVP award and led the team to victory in Super Bowl 24. Young still had a good season, completing 69% of his passes for 1,001 yards and 8 touchdowns with only 3 interceptions. On October 22nd, 1989, he posted a perfect passer rating of 158.3 while completing 11 of 12 passes for 188 yards, 3 touchdowns in a 37-20 victory over the New England Patriots. He rushed for a career-high 102 yards on just 8 carries against the New Orleans Saints on December 23, 1990, making him only the second 49er quarterback to rush for at least 100 yards in a single game. The 49ers actually lost that game 13-10. In his 4 seasons as a backup, Steve Young threw 23 touchdown passes and only 6 interceptions. Now, in the 1991 season, things started to turn around for Steve Young following the injury to Joe Montana's elbow in the 1990 NFC Championship game, which forced him to miss the entire 1991 season. Young got his chance to lead the 49ers. He did get off to a rough start. Midway through the season, the